Let me ask you something. Which city's mayor election is discussed not only locally, but across the world? Which city's stock market decides how the global economy wakes up every morning? Which city's local problems become international headlines within hours? And which city, without being a country's capital, holds this level of influence? The answer to all these questions is the same: New York. Now, at first glance, this might sound exaggerated. After all, there are many large, powerful cities in the world: London, Tokyo, Beijing, Paris, Shanghai. Each of them plays an important role in global affairs. So, what makes New York different? Why does New York matter more than any other city? To understand this, we first need to understand a simple idea. Importance is not about size, population, or beauty. Importance is about influence, and influence is about how far the impact of a place travels beyond its borders. New York is not important because it is big. It is important because what happens in New York never stays in New York. Think about this for a moment. When something happens in most cities, it remains local or national news. But when something happens in New York, it often becomes global news. A financial shock, a political decision, a cultural shift, or even a social debate in New York quickly travels across borders, continents, and time zones. Why? Let's start with money. Every weekday morning, before most of the world has even woken up, decisions made in New York are already shaping the global economy. The New York Stock Exchange and Wall Street are not just American financial centers, they are global reference points. Markets in Asia and Europe react to expectations from New York. Investors across continents watch what happens there because the ripple effects are immediate. Ask yourself, which city's trading hours define the rhythm of global finance? Which city can cause markets to rise or fall worldwide within minutes? Again, the answer is New York. This is why a financial crisis, a policy change, or even a rumor connected to New York spreads faster and farther than in almost any other city. The city doesn't just participate in the global economy, it helps set its tone. But New York's importance does not stop with money. Let me ask another question. Which city produces media that shapes global conversations? Which city's newspapers, television networks, publishing houses, and digital platforms influence how the world understands events? New York is one of the world's most powerful media hubs. From international news organizations to cultural publishers, the narratives created and amplified in New York often travel worldwide. This means New York doesn't just react to global events, it helps frame how those events are understood. This is a subtle but critical form of power. When a city influences how stories are told, it influences how people think. Now consider culture: fashion, music, art, advertising, trends. New York is not just a participant in global culture, it is a generator. Trends that start in New York frequently appear months later in other parts of the world. This is not because New York is louder, but because it sits at a unique crossroads of talent, capital, migration, and exposure. Which city attracts creators, thinkers, entrepreneurs, and professionals from nearly every country on Earth? Which city turns diversity into influence rather than chaos? New York does. This constant inflow of people and ideas makes New York a testing ground. Ideas are tried, refined, and then exported. In that sense, New York often acts like a preview of what may appear elsewhere later. Now, let's talk about something even more interesting: attention. There are many powerful cities, but very few cities that command global attention the way New York does. Attention itself is power. When the world watches a place closely, that place gains influence over conversations, priorities, and perceptions. Ask yourself this: when a city struggles with crime, housing, or inequality, how often does the global media care? In most cases, it doesn't. But when New York struggles, the world pays attention. New York becomes a symbol, not just of a city, but of larger ideas about capitalism, democracy, opportunity, and modern life. What happens there is often interpreted as a sign of broader trends. This is why New York's challenges are discussed far beyond America. They are not seen as just local problems. They are treated as signals. And here is where New York becomes truly unique. New York is not a political capital like Washington, London, or Beijing. Yet, in many ways, it competes with, and sometimes exceeds, them in global influence. This is rare. Most cities derive their importance from political power. New York derives its importance from economic gravity, cultural reach, and global attention. It doesn't rule. It doesn't command armies, but it shapes decisions. And that kind of influence is often more durable than formal power. So when people around the world discuss a New York mayoral election, it's not because they care about local politics. It's because they understand something deeper. Decisions made in New York often reflect, or even predict, wider changes. This is why New York matters. But this is only the surface level, because behind New York's visibility lies a deeper reason why it holds this position. A reason connected to history, geography, and systems that most people never think about. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. The hidden reasons New York holds global importance. To understand why New York matters more than any other city, we need to go beyond headlines and visibility. Because visibility alone does not create lasting importance. Many cities have moments of global attention, but very few hold it consistently for decades. So the real question is not just why New York matters, but how it came to matter in the first place, and why it continues to matter even as the world changes. The first hidden reason lies in geography. New York's rise was not accidental. It sits on one of the most strategic natural harbors in the world. Long before skyscrapers, stock exchanges, and global media, New York was a gateway. Goods, people, and ideas entered North America through this city. Over time, gateways turn into hubs, and hubs turn into centers of power. Ask yourself, which cities become globally important? Isolated ones or connected ones? New York's geography made it a connector. And in a globalized world, connectors gain influence faster than rulers. But geography alone is never enough. The second hidden reason is systems. New York did not just grow. It built systems that scale. Financial systems, legal systems, media systems, cultural systems. Once a city becomes central to systems that operate globally, its importance multiplies automatically. This is why New York's influence doesn't depend on a single industry. If one sector slows down, others continue to project power. Finance feeds media. Media feeds culture. Culture feeds talent. Talent feeds innovation. Innovation feeds finance again. It's a loop. Most cities depend on one dominant engine. New York runs on an ecosystem. Now, let me ask you something important. Why do powerful people, institutions, and companies still choose New York, even when it's expensive, crowded, and difficult? Because influence attracts influence. When decision makers want access, not just to money, but to information, networks, and attention, they gravitate toward places where all three intersect. New York offers that intersection better than almost any city on earth. This creates a self-reinforcing effect. The more influence a city has, the more influential people move there. And the more influential people move there, the more the city matters. This is not planned. This is gravity. Now let's talk about something even deeper: symbolism. New York is not just a city. Over time, it has become a symbol of modern life: ambition, risk, opportunity, inequality, success, and failure, all at once. Symbols are powerful because they compress complex ideas into a single image. When people talk about New York, they are often not talking about streets or buildings. They are talking about what New York represents. This is why discussions about New York feel larger than discussions about other cities. A housing crisis in New York becomes a conversation about capitalism. Crime in New York becomes a debate about urban life. Migration to New York becomes a story about opportunity. Other cities face the same issues, but New York's versions are treated as indicators, not exceptions. That's rare. Another hidden reason New York matters is timing. New York rose during the exact period when global systems were being built: international finance, global media, mass migration, cultural globalization. It didn't just adapt to these systems, it helped shape them. Once a city becomes embedded at the foundation of global systems, replacing it becomes extremely difficult. Even if another city grows faster, the old hub continues to matter because the world is already wired around it. This is why power doesn't shift overnight. Which brings us to an important misunderstanding. Many people assume that if a city faces problems, rising costs, inequality, political tensions, it must be declining. But influence doesn't disappear the moment challenges appear. In fact, challenges often attract more attention, more debate, and more scrutiny. Ask yourself, when a city is no longer important, does the world argue about it endlessly? Usually, it doesn't. The world argues about New York precisely because New York still matters. Now, let's connect this to the present. Why is New York still central in 2025, even as technology allows people to work from anywhere and power appears more distributed? Because physical concentration still matters. Ideas spread digitally, but decisions are still made in clusters. Trust is built through proximity. Influence grows through repeated interaction. And New York remains one of the densest clusters of decision making on Earth. This is why global companies keep offices there, why global media keeps headquarters there, why global debates often pass through there. New York doesn't need to control everything. It just needs to remain unavoidable. And that is the key to its importance. So when you hear people across the world discussing a New York mayor election, reacting to its economy, or debating its social changes, it's not random curiosity, it's recognition, conscious or unconscious, that New York acts as a signal of where systems are moving, a signal of where pressure is building, a signal of what may come next. That's why New York matters more than any other city. Not because it is perfect, not because it is powerful in the traditional sense, but because the world is still listening to it.